I used to think old houses told the truth. They creak, they settle, they complain. If something is wrong, a century-old beam will say it with a pop you can feel in your teeth. That's what I believed the first winter we moved into the Harrington house. A long brick rectangle with a widow's walk and a view of the river that looked gentle from the front room and carnivorous from the cellar window when the water rose. My wife's name is Lila. She's the kind of person strangers ask for directions. In the city, her work was archiving the lives of people who forgot to label their boxes. Here, the Historical Society hired her to reactivate the Harrington House stage rooms, guide donors, make the past perform. I wrote code from the parlor and pretended the house liked the sound of typing. We told ourselves it would be a year, just one. Enough time for the house to remember us and for us to remember ourselves. The first odd thing wasn't in the house at all. It was on the river. There's a train trestle 2 bends south, an iron comb across the sky. At 1:13 a.m. every night, a single whistle. Not a full train, just a sound, quick, precise, like a throat clearing. The Historical Society said freight doesn't run that late. Lila said, then it's the wind in the braces. The caretaker, Mr. Bell, said the river keeps time the way old men do. Loudly, then not at all. We found the first diary in a drawer with a false back. Lila said of course there'd be one. Old houses collect paper like barns collect cats. The leather was brittle, pages thin as onion skin. The year was 1911. The handwriting belonged to a woman who called herself M. She wrote about a winter flood and a man who measured the river with a stick and a string and a prayer. She wrote, secrets like water find downhill. Lila pressed her palm to the page as if she were checking for a pulse. We started eating late because donors always want to see the house by lamplight. At noon, Lila stayed for tours that ran long on good stories. When she came home, she smelled like beeswax and old paper, the kind of smell you can't fake. I made tea and waited for the moment when she'd sit and tell me the anecdote that would be our private thing. Lately, the anecdote arrived thin as fog. She'd say, a woman cried in the nursery today, and I'd ask, why? And she'd shrug, people cry in rooms that remember. The second odd thing was the dumbwaiter. The rope ran from the cellar to the kitchen through a shaft you could lose a cat in. The caretaker told us not to use it. It stuck. But sometimes around 11:30, I heard a hushed pulley sound, like someone feeding the house a secret. Once, I opened the dumbwaiter door and found a folded napkin inside. On the napkin, a smudge of wax the color of dried blood and half of a word pressed in reverse. On the hinge of the dumbwaiter door, a new scratch bright as a confession. Mr. Bell must be fixing something, Lila said when I showed her the napkin. At midnight, I asked. He's old. Old people sleep weird, she said, and kissed my forehead without aiming. I told myself to stop cataloging details that didn't add up. Then I found the second phone. It was in the blue and white ginger jar on the mantel, the one Lila mocked when we moved in. It's pretending to be important. The phone was thin, uncased, the kind of thing you buy without a plan to keep. The name on the lock screen said simply, A text glowed under glass. Wednesday, 1:13. No hello, no signature, just time, date, and the train whistle's exact minute. I put the phone back like a bomb and spent the afternoon fixing a bug that wasn't broken. At 1:12 a.m., I stood in the front room with the lamp off and my hand on the windowsill. The river made its black rope sound. The whistle bled into the night. Somewhere a latch shifted. It wasn't the house's old hum. It was a modern click, as if someone were careful with our present. I stayed awake until Lila slid in at 1:37, cheeks bright with cold, hair threaded with mist like she'd been to a place that thinks it's weather. Couldn't sleep? She asked, not surprised. Could you? I asked. She said she was late because a donor wanted proof the bed in the blue room was original. People are weird, she added, and turned her back like we were both trying to be kind. The next morning I asked Mr. Bell about the whistle. Old iron sings when the temperature drops, he said. At exactly 1:13 every night? He grinned without teeth. Time is a habit. What about the dumbwaiter? Don't, he said. Pull the rope on an old thing, and it'll remember it was built to lift. Who else has keys? I asked. Keys don't keep people out, he said. They tell them where the door is. I checked security footage even though I hated myself for it. Tiny cameras the society put in corners so donors wouldn't pocket history. The night before, the blue room camera showed nothing but a sway of a curtain no one opened. The downstairs foyer showed what I already knew, my own shape crossing to the window, like a man on a stage who forgot his line. That afternoon, Lila said, "We got a new donor, not new. Returned." Returned like a boomerang? Returned like an exile, she said. His family built the dock. What's his name, Mr. I asked. She rolled the name in her mouth like wine she wasn't sure she wanted to order. Adrian Harrington, she said. He hates the house being called that, but money loses arguments. Of course, I Googled him like a high schooler. Foundation this, board that, photos of a smile that thinks walls are suggestions. A grainy picture from a gala showed him with his hand near the elbow of a woman whose dress cost more than my first car. The caption called him the prodigal. The article said he'd lost his wife in a flood. The comments argued about whether grief looks better in navy or black. I didn't confront Lila, not then. I went to the cellar. It smelled like wet pennies. The river was up, you could see it in the way the light moved on the packed earth. Against the far wall, with his tide line like a ring inside a glass, the dumbwaiter shaft opened its square mouth. I pulled the rope. The pulley answered in a voice of dry wood. Something caught. Then the platform slid down, stuttered, stopped. On it, a bell jar with a red ribbon tied around the knob, like a Victorian joke about warning signs. Under the jar, a scrap of paper with the house's crest. On the scrap, Undercroft, hier, Widza, 113. Undercroft is the kind of word old houses use to feel fancy about their basements. In ours, it was a half-bricked room at the river-facing foundation, with a door that used to be a door and now pretended to be a wall. The mortar around the fake door had cracked in one line like a held breath. I traced it with my finger. My finger came away chalky. I put the bell jar back and went upstairs and made a casserole I didn't want. Around 9, Lila texted, "Donor dinner, don't wait up." I waited. At 1:11, I went to the blue and white jar. The phone was gone. I don't know what you call the thing that takes over your body when your marriage's floor wobbles. It's not courage, not quite shame. It's a hand in your back that isn't your own. I put on boots and my grandfather's coat and a face that could pass for neutral and stepped into a corridor of night. The river was swollen, audible, a herd of dark animals moving in one direction. A lantern bobbed near the dock. 2 shapes stood at the end of it. Lila's scarf was the red one I bought her when we still gave each other winter as a present. The other shape had a posture I recognized from photos. A man who believes water is something you cross. I stood behind a fir at the edge of our property and listened to sentences I won't quote here because the word intimacy should mean more than proximity, and I'm trying not to be cruel. They didn't kiss. If they had, I might have felt, what? Cleaner? It was worse than that. It was more specific. They were recounting a story they both understood by its first adjective. Blue Flood, North Pier, M's Diary. They were talking about the house as if it were a witness they were avoiding cross-examining. I found the second ledger, Lila said. Not the 1911 one, the private one. So you know, Adrian said. I know the house covered for them, she said. And for a second, I didn't know if them meant ancestors or us. Wednesday? He asked. Wednesday, she said. They left the dock and went not into the house, but along the side where the foundation stones soak up moonlight and gossip. Lila lifted the skirting of ivy near the undercroft and pressed her fingers into mortar like a piano with a single note. The line I'd rubbed turned into a handle. The wall opened, they went inside. I should have walked into the river. I went to the cellar. The undercroft was a missing room, a rectangle that didn't match the interior plan, a place you feel in a draft and a temperature change. The air in there wasn't cold. It was flat, like the room had been holding its breath for 100 years. Lila and Adrian stood near the far wall where iron rings once helped the house argue with floods. On a table, a new table, our table from the kitchen, with its gouge in the corner, sat a row of items under glass tokens arranged like an altar for people who prefer control to gods. In the center, under a larger bell jar, was the diary. Not M's, not 1911. This hand was a frantic script, edges singed, where someone rotated the paper over a candle to make it look old, and then decided that was ridiculous. I knew the handwriting. I'd read enough of Lila's post-its to recognize the angle of her guilt. When she lifted the jar, Adrian said, "You don't have to do this." "Yes," she said, "we do. The house keeps lies. We're using the house to keep the truth." I came out of the dark. "Then speak it," I said. I don't know whose face cracked more, his or hers. Lila set the jar down too hard. It clinked like a bell rung for a fire. Adrian took a step back the way a man does when he meets the edge of a hole. "I was going to tell you," Lila said. "The sentence is universally useless." "What were you going to tell me?" I asked. "That the Undercroft eats secrets? That the whistle is not wind? That you made a museum exhibit out of my ignorance?" "It isn't like that," she said, which is the other sentence that never helps. Adrian said, "This is my fault. I asked her to meet me because my family's story isn't the plaque on the stairwell. My great-grandfather didn't lose the North Pier in a flood. He cut it to redirect water away from our mill and into the common docks. The river took the path he offered. 3 houses went. 1 woman died. The diary M's records it. The second ledger names him. I can't let the society put my name on a room unless the room knows what it's named after." "You could have written an email," I said. He smiled like a man swallowing a bottle cap. "Harringtons don't confess digitally." "And you?" I asked Lila. "What's your role? Archivist? Accomplice? Lover?" Her mouth changed shape on that last word, a flicker of something like anger, something like relief. "I didn't sleep with him," she said, and my body believed before my mind allowed the luxury. "I did something worse." "What's worse than that?" I asked, because I needed a list with my name on it to petition the world for clarity. "I told him the parts of our marriage you won't hear," she said. "I told him that you made a spreadsheet for our life and put a checkbox next to each month we didn't drown. I told him I wanted to be a historian who told the truth about a house and a wife who didn't have to footnote her own sentences." "You told a stranger our house's interior," I said, and immediately hated my own metaphor. "He isn't a stranger to this house," she said, which did not help. The whistle blew. The Undercroft shook, not like an earthquake, but like a memory. From somewhere above, the dumbwaiter sighed. Mr. Bell coughed in the cellar. He'd followed in the way old men are always already in rooms you thought were empty. He didn't look surprised. He looked relieved the conversation had finally arrived. "Time," he said. "For what?" I asked. "For the thing you both came down here to do," he said. "Decide what you're going to keep and what you're going to drown." Adrian stepped back again. "The ledger," he started. "I don't care about your ledger," I said, and then heard myself and knew it wasn't true. "I care about the gallery you built out of the piece of my wife I didn't want to see." "That's what galleries are for," he said, and Mr. Bell shot him a look that made him remember a Harrington isn't a good excuse for a man. Lila lifted the diary she'd written and set it on the table without the jar. The pages were numbered in pencil. Page 14 was a list of the ways people cheat that never involve bodies. Sharing the firsts that don't belong to you. Staging rooms for someone else to walk through. Saving your best sentences for ears that didn't pay for them. She pressed her hand against the paper like a doctor checking a pulse and said, "I wrote this because I didn't want the only record to be the plaque." "Read," Mr. Bell said. She did. She read aloud words I recognized in texture, if not in sequence. She read about the night I stayed up making a budget instead of asking why she was awake. She read about me telling a joke at a dinner party that required her to be the punchline because it killed, and it did, and we laughed, and then I wondered why she slept facing the window. She read about her meeting Adrian at the dock the first time because the society asked her to ask him for money, and about the second time because she wanted to ask forgiveness for wanting his attention. She read about the Undercroft and the whistles and the glass bell and the jar and the jar and the jar. When she finished, the room felt 8 inches shorter. I put my hand on the table and left a print in dust anyone could catalog. "So what do we do?" I asked, to the house as much as to the people. "Tell," Mr. Bell said. "All of it. To the right people. and then tie it to something heavy and put it someplace it can't drift back just because the tide was in a different mood. The right people turned out to be the society board, 5 women who wore cashmere-like armor, and a lawyer who believed in nouns. We told them Harrington money redirected a river and that the plaque lied. Adrian told them what he'd done with other lies. He opened his checkbook like a man building a bridge he didn't intend to cross and said, "Name the room after M." The board nodded in the way institutions nod when truth arrives with money sewn into its coat. After the meeting, Lila and I went back to the house we hadn't decided to leave or keep. We sat in the blue room and didn't speak. When we did, it was about the smallest thing, the dumbwaiter. "I kept sending you notes," she said. "Little ones. Napkins. The word ask in wax. I thought if you said, 'What is this?' before it spelled itself, I would stop wanting to say anything to anyone else." "I saw them," I said. "I thought they were for the house." "They were," she said, "and you're in it." We went upstairs. We lay on opposite edges of the bed like countries after a war. I slept hard. I dreamed about water moving backwards. In the morning, the river had dropped 6 inches. The train trestle didn't whistle. For the first time in months, the house didn't make a sound that felt like a test. Lila brewed coffee and didn't hum. She said, "You didn't ask me whether I love him." "I didn't," I said. "Do you?" "No," she said. And the relief in her voice made me angry for a stupid second, because I'd already spent so much energy bracing for a different answer. "I loved what he was to the story," she said. "A door I could open and not have to fix what was behind it." "And me?" "You're the room," she said. "That's the problem and the promise." We didn't decide in one conversation. We never do. We told the society to keep the Undercroft open 1 day a month as an exhibit called Corrections. We wrote the plaque together. It said, "This house was built with brick and stories. Some stories were wrong. We changed them." People cried in the Undercroft the way they cried in the nursery. They left notes under jars. They admitted things. They asked for smaller rooms. Adrian moved to a glass condo that looks like water. He married a woman who sells boats to men who don't sail. He sent a letter once that said he was grateful we didn't make him the moral. I didn't respond. Lila didn't either. The house did. It creaked when his name came up and then stopped, which is about as much forgiveness as architecture offers. Lila and I learned how to ask. It sounds small. It is not. "Where are you? What do you need? Is this for me or for the plaque?" She stopped keeping a second phone in pottery. I stopped pretending spreadsheets are romance if I put hearts in the margins. She gave a tour where she said out loud to strangers, "History is what we correct in public after we tell the truth in private." I stood in the back and did not cry, and then cried. If you want a twist here, when I pulled the rope in the dumbwaiter a week after the board meeting, a jar came down with a note in my handwriting. I don't remember writing it. It said, "Ask him why the trestle whistles when there's no train." Mr. Bell smiled when I showed him. "The metal cools in contract," he said, "every night at the same minute. It sings because that's what iron does when it tries to be smaller than it was and remembers it can't." We stayed the year. In spring, the river put its shoulders down and let the banks breathe. On our last night at 1:13, the trestle was silent. The house did not pop. We went to the Undercroft with 2 jars and a length of ribbon. In the first, we put the second phone. In the second, we put a scrap of paper that said, "Ask before you archive." We tied them together and set them on the shelf. No glass over them. Dust allowed. We left the house to someone else who wanted to hear whether old wood tells the truth. We moved to a smaller apartment with no history and a dumbwaiter that is just a cupboard because the building is new. Sometimes I wake at 1:13 anyway and listen to the world tell me what it is. Sometimes Lila wakes with me and we ask each other the smallest possible question, is this for us? If the answer is yes, we keep it above water. If the answer is no, we write it down, label it correctly, and put it on a shelf that doesn't pretend to be a river. I don't believe old houses tell the truth anymore. I think people do, when they're forced. I think beams pop whether you're listening or not. I think you can build a marriage out of corrections if you're willing to issue them publicly and accept them privately. I think whistles happen at 1:13 because metal remembers and then forgets and remembers again. And when I walk past pottery in other people's living rooms, I touch the lids not to spy, but to remind myself that secrets are less romantic when you can name them. Lila touches my hand away. Ask, she says. And I do. And most nights the answer lives in a room I recognize, in a house that does not have to lie for us because we finally stopped asking it to. If you made it to the end of the story, thank you. It means a lot. New stories like this one are posted every single day, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one. And if this story touched you, please give it a like. It really helps more people find our content.